We are streaming, we are recording, we are live. Do you want to share some Martin Heidegger's information for us, Dan?
Sure. Here's some general information on Martin Heidegger, who lived from 1889 to 1976. He's a German philosopher. Most of us have heard the name, but he's known for the continental tradition as well as hermeneutics, which is the interpretation of the Bible and biblical texts. The thing that sticks in my mind, which for this philosopher, is that he makes up his own terms. When the term does not exist, he creates a term in German, and we're going to, in the reading today, we're going to start off with one of those right away. So that's a quick overview.
And here comes our member here.
It was work-related. I'm very sorry, guys.
We're live streaming.
That's all right. Here we go. We've got two screens here. You can look on either. This is the one we're transmitting out of. Sorry about that. This is Stacy, by the way.
Hey, Stacy. How's it going?
All right. I'm just going to go ahead and open us up with the first paragraph. I'm going to stop after the first sentence because, as Dan just shared, Heidegger comes up with his own terms, and we've already gone over what these are in the first two readings, but it's important to review them, especially for folks who are joining us for the first time online or in person. Starting from page 52 in the PDF, that's page 17 of the essay. What kind of unconcealment is it then that is peculiar to that which comes to stand forth upon this setting upon that challenges? And I'm gonna work backwards here because does anyone remember what Heidegger meant when he said challenges? Challenges is
challenges is forcing the substance to act a certain way, to perform a certain way.
Yes.
Forcing the land to produce something. And as a result, you form the industry around it.
Right. Yeah. So you got that, Jason. It's
I was awake there.
Unlike in past times where maybe you worked with the soil to produce a crop, challenging was digging into it to produce ore or coal. And going back to your other point about this being post-war Germany and the effect of the war, I'm thinking that in a way it's almost as if you are subscribing or drafting the earth into bringing forth to, that's where the setting upon comes from. When he says setting upon, it's like you're taking it and you're subscribing it into your army to produce the effect of your will, which is probably a very German thing. But Stacy and I were at Winn-Dixie last night and going through hundreds and hundreds of pounds of raw meat just on either side of us. It was amazing. And I remember looking at that and thinking, there is no way all this gets just consumed or bought and eaten. Mm-hmm. And in that way, Hyro, come on board. We just started. We only just opened the first sentence here, so you're still.
You're in this.
Hyro is our organizer. We're live streaming and recording. Yes. Okay, you'll be all right. But we're not transmitting our images. Only the text of the essay. So you're safe visually.
And the audio?
The audio's there. Yeah, everything. Yeah, for all posterity, or until the great EMP falls from the sky.
Stupid questions.
Oh, you can ask all the questions you like. It's up to posterity to figure out if it's wise or stupid.
You know, you with that statement you made, you just brought up something I thought of. Now, it's curious to think if he is one of those that wishes to return to a pre-war, pre-technological society or existence, if that's the case, you all might be interested in a book. Now, I can get you the author's name, but it's called Directive 51. I can't even say enough about it.
We look forward to the link as a comment to this.
So just to say what it's about, a terrorist organization launches a a biological weapon that destroys all of the organic technology, meaning all the plastic, or the rubber, or the synthetic metal, or the alloys, or the synthetic fabrics, everything. So we are returned to a 1850s type of lifestyle. Yeah.
The other phrase we just covered what the challenges means, the different way in which man approaches nature in the modern era, the setting upon, how we've almost subscribed or drafted the earth or physicality towards human will in a way that wasn't seen prior. And the other phrase in this first sentence, unconcealment, which is what this whole way of being reveals about, I could say, at least us as humanity. It shows what we're willing to do, or what we're maybe possible, capable of doing. And there may be a third idea in terms of what it unconceals.
So the challenge poses something that yields unconcealment. Is that what you're saying?
Challenge is it's the active verb. Unconcealment is the thing that's revealed upon those who does the challenge.
Got it.
There's one other, and I keep going back to the whole being amongst hundreds of pounds of raw meat last night. Stacy and I went to Winn-Dixie, where the beef people are, and we were thinking
that was her old.
Yeah, we were thinking there's no way all this animal flesh is actually being consumed, because there was just so much of it. And that's where I think it reveals that we are willing to create another concept that Heidegger brings up, this idea of the standing supply, that you just take and use just for the potential use. And coal, you'll eventually use it, but meat has a shelf life, but we apply the same logistic to animal flesh, to other living creatures, just for our potential use.
I can tell you a personal experience that illustrates that just a little bit. I was in Publix, and it was like I think they were like 10 minutes from closing, and I was going through the meat aisle, and there was a huge cart full of meat, and I said, what are you guys doing with that? And he's like, we have to throw it away. And I mean, that's a whole, that's probably like $1,000 worth. Each steak is 20, I don't know, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm like, can't you donate that? And the answer is no, because people could sue or whatever.
Yeah.
Get sick.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's all the consumption kind of use, have it ready just to be used.
And in addition, there are some times when technology fails us. I was in a store this week, and the electricity had been off for like 12 hours or something. And I noticed right away something was wrong, because some shelves were cleared of all items. They had to throw it all away because the technology had failed long enough that it would again cause sickness potentially.
Yeah, there are regulations on that. Well, if not external, internal ones for the suing reasons. That's probably, I'm not saying that's the reason why, but it reminded me, I injected a little bit of Jacques Ellul in there, and he talks about how efficiency becomes. Then Jacques is French, and we did a meetup between the second reading and now. He wrote something like 30 books and was a French jurist. He was over in the French underground during the war. Heidegger was in charge of a university, so in Germany.
On the Nazi side, right?
Yeah. He was. There were classifications. He was like 5th level, which was the lowest level, but still, it became an issue for him, and it's tainted his work since then. So I bring up that because if you've ever checked out like a Citroen automobile, they tend to be really elegant and efficient. And one of the things brought up by that comment of Lul's is the idea of how efficiency becomes and maybe this fits in with the progress the mid-20th century continental idea. Important thing to know about Lowell is he wrote the book called The Technological Society, so it's very much related in ways to what we're reading tonight. So efficiency becomes sort of like the thing to aim for in the Technological Society, and in the way that we see smart grids and meters that's been rolled out over the last decade plus, in a way of better managing the amount of inputs we put into our energy grid so that we're not overproducing and therefore wasting. Probably some of those ideas that are already being applied to the energy sector could be applied to the food chain sector so that we don't wind up having thousands of dollars of whole cows being slaughtered.
But then you have to have your supply chain within a couple of hours drive to replenish because we don't have replicators.
Well, there's an argument. Kevin Carson writes in his August 2012 essay about something like energy libertarian perspective. He says that when you remove the subsidies from the transportation, like this, all of our oil is subsidized by us. And if you take that out, then the price goes up, and then the natural result is that the supply chains actually shorten, and the economies become more localized, just because it then is cheaper. Because it's sort of like this artificial experiment that was hoisted on us in the 20th century. By putting those subsidies into that, you could have this mass globalization and devote one state to meat production, for instance. But then you run into this oversupply issue. If you're closer to the cow or the farmer, then you're probably going to get a better product, and it's not going to be wasted.
Or what the supermarket could do is say, since we have so many branches of Publix, we could have a limited supply, and then have an active computer network, a database showing the manager could see all the inventory of all the stores and saying, you have a lot, send some over here so we could use it. Therefore, it all gets utilized within the time period.
Right, and these are, there are probably systems to some degree or another already in place like this. What we've been talking about in the last 2 minutes is an example of what he would term as poesis, which is sort of poetry. And I think as we learn to write better and better poems or go back and revise our technological flows, then we get something that's a little bit more efficient. But efficiency isn't necessarily the best ideal, and we're going to continue reading so that we can get as much of this as we can. I'm going to finish this paragraph, and then whoever wants to jump in for the second paragraph is welcome. Everywhere, everything is ordered to stand by, to be immediately at hand, indeed to stand there just so that it may be on call for further ordering. Whatever is ordered about in this way has its own standing. We call it the standing reserve.
Bestand.
Bestand, thank you. Dan, by the way, is our resident taken German guy, so we count on him whenever we need pronunciation. The word expresses here something more, and something more essential than mere stock. The name standing reserve, in quotation marks, assumes the rank of an inclusive rubric. It designates nothing less than the way in which everything presence is, that's another one of Heidegger's terms, that is wrought upon by the challenging revealing. Whatever stands by in the sense of standing reserve no longer stands over against us as objects.
Wow. Well, my mind was on a tangent of this seems like a description of Amazon. Everything is standing by, millions of items, any of which we can order and have almost immediately.
But I think the key here is that they will stay there in perpetuity forever. They're non-perishable. So if you have 100 so-called widgets, eventually somebody will, over the course of time, order 100 widgets. It's not time dependent.
The neat thing about Amazon is they do the long tail all the way out to the individual unit. And then they also tap into the network of existing sellers. So they've got an amazing poesis in place, which has allowed Bezos, of course, to become the richest man in the world. So that's an argument for making greater poetry. This last sentence, whatever stands by in the sense of standing reserve, no longer stands over against us as object. What does that mean? I think it means that we have, with the exception of potential hurricane or massive fire or earthquake, utterly and totally subjugated nature to our will. And the civilization that we've built up as a result of that we just sort of take for granted, is really utterly unique in a way that for most of human existence just did not exist. That's what we would think of as natural environment. And technology is something that humans do. It's not like it's unnatural because it's part of our own natural process. It's part of the unconcealment or the revealing of who we are and what we do as a species. But everything presences. It's the difference between the cow you could go out in the field and maybe pet, or that piece of bread behind plastic.
But he doesn't talk about maybe things that he might take for granted, like the candle or the gas light to the light bulb, and the advances in that. He doesn't go from the horse and carriage to the Ford car to the modern car.
It all happened in his lifetime.
Right. So maybe he has an indoor plumbing, building codes. These things are represented technological process because that is the essence. The essence is the need. Someone said, "Why can't we have it this way?" So it's the need. They researched it, and then they, if it didn't exist, they proceeded to invent it, and then they had to create a whole manufacturing hub around that.
And an infrastructure to distribute it.
Right, and so in some ways, some things were more efficient now. The telephone, when it first came out, that improved efficiency for any business, anybody.
There's a place around the intersection of John Young and South OBT called Data Site Orlando. It's one of several data sites. But this was the original one. It's called that today, but originally it was the data processing center for financials for AT&T before they were broken up. And it was the prototype. The functions were later moved out to other places, but machinery that would have processed all the bills for AT&T throughout their entire service region was right out of this one building. And you can take a tour of the place and see their HVAC setup, and the original one, and then also the newer one that was put in. And the newer one has all sorts of smart ways to adjust according to need, which is dynamic because they have lots and lots of servers, lots of servers. And originally, it was technology developed 50, 40, 30 years ago, whenever they got out. Finally, AT&T did. But one very interesting thing about that building, that structure, is that they're only one of two corporations that received a special license from Orange County, Florida, to be able to drill down, because it's HVAC, you need water to run through that system, to drill down all the way down to the Florida aquifer. And it was that building and Walt Disney World. Who wants to read our second paragraph?
I will.
Okay.
Starting with yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you gotta use
Yeah,
the
she's
mic.
very
Yeah, on my phone.
particular.
Starts with yet. Okay, yet an airliner that stands on the runway is surely an object. Certainly, we can represent the machine so, but then conceals itself as to what and how it is. Revealed, It stands on the taxi strip only as a standing reserve, inasmuch as it is ordered to ensure the possibility of transportation. For this, it must be in its whole structure and in every one of the constituent parts, on call for duty, i.e., ready for takeoff. Here, it would be appropriate to discuss Hegel's definition of the machine as an autonomous tool. When applied to the tools of the craftsman, his characterization is correct. Characterized in this way, however, the machine is not thought at all from out of the essence of technology within which it belongs. Seen in terms of the standing reserve, the machine is completely unautonomous, for it has its standing only from the ordering of the orderable. Wow, Heidegger is tough to read.
Or it could be the fault of the translator. Maybe if you read the original in German, you would get, oh, that's what, and you would say, recommend a different way of saying it in English.
Could be.
So, in terms of standing reserve, pardon me, planes for decades have been able to take off and fly themselves and land themselves. The pilots there is not just to feel good, but emergencies, because automation doesn't have the answer for every problem. Pilots themselves, though, when they run into a problem, they pull out a book, turn to the page, and start going through a checklist for that problem. So in that way, even there's automation, but not every corner case will ever be in advance have a solution platform.
What do you know of automation in the office? Like being able to do everything in an office online or on the computer, and not at all need to print out anything. Like when you're billed, instead of receiving it by mail, you get it on your computer. Like invoices come to your computer, and you pay it on. And you, is it possible to have an office that there's even paying employees or paying bills? You're sending it like through what's that called? ACH or EFT?
Right into so that the
You're
money
like
flows
auto
are going
pay
into.
and everything. That's what we're trying to do. Everyone's trying to do to not have to
Then
file invoices.
Then you know that all of that is limited to the degree to which people programming the systems are able to imagine how.
Or it's limited to the habits of the business itself. Maybe the people are hesitant to want to change.
And you know that's a persistent problem we see in technology is that business processes develop over time. However, once you automate them, they tend to get frozen, and that's why you wind up. Well, that's why, for instance, the IRS ends up having to go back to their system that's 60 years old, right? Or well, that's a good enough example. There's standing reserve. I got to start from the bottom and work up here. Seen in terms of the standing reserve, yeah, that plane isn't going to take off. It's unautonomous until it's issued a destination by a pilot that walks in and keys it in. And it gets clearance through the air traffic control network of controllers and all the technology that supports their jobs. And the flight plans that are booked in advance. There's a complete process there. But what, you know, we're being asked to discuss Heidel's definition of the machine as an autonomous tool. And I don't know what was available in Heidel's time. I know that precision engineering was in place starting in the 18th century, and Heidel was predecessor. He was mostly 19th century. So, I mean, perhaps the idea is a mill that produces an interchangeable part, and everything that would make that interchangeable part the thing that would be the same each and every time is part of that definition. But I have to admit, I didn't do enough research to know. So I don't think we can talk too much with that. So that gives us an opportunity to continue further on in our essay unless anyone else has anything to add. You want to read our third paragraph?
Sure. the fact that now, wherever we try to point to modern technology as the challenging, revealing, the words setting upon, ordering, and standing reserve, obtrude and accumulate in a dry, monotonous, and therefore oppressive way, has its basis in what is now coming to utterance.
All right, so we're building up to something. There's a definition that we missed for bestand. Ordinarily denotes a store. Do we want to read the footnote here? I think we've covered most of this.
Well, but he doesn't, even put in quotations what he calls modern technology.
You'd be talking about the modern technology at the time of the essay. Automobiles, airplanes.
Well, but I thought about that. I think I made reference in the comments. That's manufacturing and industry.
Okay.
I think we have a hard time separating what we have known of technology over the past 40 years compared to what maybe they thought of technology in the first part of the 20th century.
I'm glad you bring up the first part of the 20th century because here's Germany rebuilding and they're able to apply the most modern. They're rebuilding their infrastructure. So whereas over in North America, we may be dealing with 1930s hydroelectric dams. They're able to produce 1950s hydroelectric dams and maybe get a little bit more squeeze out of the rivers.
But does technology apply to something that's wholly mechanical?
Not necessarily, no.
So
because technology also includes processes. How to go about doing things. Technique, which is going back to the Alul.
Like the assembly line.
And yeah, the assembly line, right. And the whole idea is that you brought up because you're in the process of automating some companies' business processes. It was interesting because when there were mills creating looms in the 19th century, the buildings were tall because there were belts going up high. I might have brought this up in the first. But then things changed over the decades as people figured out better and better ways of going about things. And they continue to change. Even the Tesla plant is like the most automated, most robots. And then it's also the process. And Elon Musk, I think, is famous for sitting in on every single step of anything that a human does in that process. So it would be what would be considered state of the art right now. But once that's done, that's going to be what that is for as long as that plant exists, right? And once you've got your thing done, that whatever that thing is, unless someone pays to have it updated or someone figures out that it's more painful to continue doing it the old way and then has to find a whole other set of people to revise or replace that process, then whatever business process you guys come up with the people doing it manually or doing it manually, it's just going to be like that. And that gets into the whole monotonous, the dry, the oppressive way. I mean, who likes making PowerPoint slides or writing a Word document? You do? Well, that's good.
I do.
You probably because there's enough variability in that to give you some freedom and some leeway for how you're going about it.
Well, what would you do otherwise?
Yeah, it takes longer otherwise.
I mean, that is the equivalent of the modern slideshow.
Yeah.
It seems like what this is sort of suggesting is that once technology enters a certain sphere, which he's using these words to describe, it becomes oppressive because it limits human creativity and ingenuity.
Thank you. I guess we'll finish reading the footnote here for Bassan. Heidegger uses the word to characterize the manner in which everything commanded into place and ordered according to the challenging, demanding, ruling in modern technology presents as revealed. He wishes to stress here not the permanency, but the orderability and substitutability of objects. And I don't know about you, but just about every job I've ever done, I've always worked like, okay, if I get hit by a bus, someone's going to be able to step in and just keep on going where I left off. But I document my code so that, But what's the rule? Always write your code as though the person coming after you knows your home address. Sorry. Just the background.
Code stuff?
Yeah.
Is this?
Well, I before I became stay-at-home dad, I was writing software.
Right. Gotcha. Cool.
But the joke there is, they can show up really frustrated with a baseball bat. So get it right.
Get it right. Gotcha. Okay. I was a little lost, but I get it now.
The stand contrasts. I'm sorry. Let me scroll up a bit. Contrast with, please.
Gegenstand.
Thank you. I would not have gotten that. Object. That which stands over against. Objects indeed lose their character as objects when they are caught up in the standing reserve. And yeah, I mean, that's like, oh boy, corporate America. I mean, have you ever felt like a widget?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing about this. Later on, go on, you have something to contribute.
Go ahead.
Well, somewhere along here, there's the idea that not only has nature become part of this drafted and conquered beast, but humanity itself. And I think it goes back to the title of the question, the title of the essay, the question concerning technology is technology merely a supporting effort to allow, I don't know, let's say the owner of the capital or bureaucracy to just ply and conquer not only the world, but most of the people in it? That's a really, really big question. Next paragraph. Who wants to read next?
I'll read it.
Okay, let me scroll.
Yeah, there you go.
Page 1853 in the...
I can read here too. Who accomplishes the challenging setting upon through which what we call the real is revealed as standing reserve? Obviously man. To what extent is man capable of such a revealing? Man can indeed conceive, fashion, and carry through this or that in one way or another, but man does not have control over unconcealment itself, in which at any given time the real shows itself or withdraws. The fact that the real has been showing itself in the light of ideas ever since the time of Plato did not bring it about. The thinker only responded to what addressed itself to him.
Therefore, man is subjective again, in a Heidegger sense.
Yes. Do we have to mention what the difference between subjective and objective here is?
Well, subjective in a general philosophical sense is that we not only see the world, each of us subjectively in our own way, but we also see truth subjectively.
Yes, right.
There was a great, a week ago on BBC radio, they had a lecture by Jonathan Sumption, a former Supreme Court justice in the UK. And he discussed how truth and the law are not only elastic, but they are subjective, which the latter part is obvious. But he was saying an interesting nuance that really caught my attention. He said that the purpose of a justice today in the US or in the UK, anywhere in the world, is that he must or she must subjectively interpret at this moment in time and for this culture what is the right thing to do in this condition. So it encapsulated a lot.
Well put. Thank you. Does anyone else have like a question or idea about subjective? What do you think, Harold?
About what?
We're going to continue through the essay. Two things that got me just on that paragraph. It's the sentence.
Well, the sentence that starts with the fact, it's already been there. you didn't discover it.
Right.
So, I mean, you didn't invent it. You may have uncovered it, unconcealed it, and brought it into a purpose.
Right.
Because, for instance, there was a great show that may or may not be coming back, or Timeless. I think it was on NBC. But anyway, they would travel back in time. Someone invented the time machine. So, say you took your mobile phone, which has a great deal of use today, and you didn't realize you had it on your person, and you went back to, I don't know, to do some mission in 1754 or whatever. It would just be a paperweight. They would not even know what to do with it.
Unless you had a cash copy of Wikipedia on board, right? Yeah.
So in that regard, they're not going to unconceal its meaning without, if they ever could, because even if they did, it has no purpose.
All right, I'm gonna I'm gonna leave the time travel hypothesis stuff there and get to the, man does not have control over unconcealment itself. It reminds me of, I don't know if it was one of the big three. I don't know if it's Plato or Aristotle or Socrates, but the quote goes, "You learn more in an hour by playing a game with a person than a year of just interacting with them in some other way." But the idea that we don't know what's being unrevealed about ourselves until we're actually applying this is, well, that's another thing that technology does for us. But that's enough. Let's keep going.
Technology as a process, then.
Yeah, it's a process, but it's a process that shows things off that maybe we didn't know before we started to engage about it. Not just know about the technology itself, but know about ourselves in terms of our own character, where we stand, what we actually know.
I think it might expedite. I'm not sure if it.
Yes,
I don't
it
think
does.
it necessarily shines light on something that wasn't already. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think it just might increase the speed at which we become aware of it, or something like that. I don't know.
Maybe we're not as nice as we think that we are.
Or as advanced in terms of consciousness, awareness.
Yes.
Maybe we can build buildings and jet planes and this and that, but I mean, we're still reading philosophers from 2,000 years ago, and
It still applies.
yeah, you know what I mean. So on some kind of level, it seems, I don't know.
Who wants to read next?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll go. Only to the extent that man, for his part, is already challenged to exploit the energies of nature, can this ordering, revealing, happen. If man is challenged, ordered to do this, then does not man himself belong even more originally than nature within the standing reserve? The current talk about human resources, about the supply of patients for a clinic, gives evidence of this. The forester, who in the wood measures the felled timber and to all appearances walks the same forest path in the same way as did his grandfather, is today commanded by profit-making in the lumber industry, whether he knows it or not. He is made subordinate to the orderability of cellulose, which for its part is challenged forth by the need for paper, which is then delivered to newspapers and illustrated magazines. The latter, in their turn, set public opinion by swallowing what is printed, so that a set configuration of opinion becomes available on demand. Yet precisely because man is challenged more originally than are the energies of nature, i.e. into the process of ordering, he never is transformed into mere standing reserve. Since man drives technology forward, he takes part in ordering as a way of revealing, but the unconcealment itself, within which ordering unfolds, is never a human handiwork, any more than is the realm through which man is already passing every time he, as a subject, relates to an object. Now we have to remember that Heidegger lived only until the 70s, so newspapers were the mass media of the time. And today, of course, this cellulose example would would not be current because we now have the internet. He might change his description to say that it's merely the need to generate energy from coals, from sun, from all those areas to generate the energy needed to power.
Well, also we're challenging forth the rare earth metals. And we've heard that certainly in the news. Anyone want to say anything more on this?
But also challenging the the device and the process, because look how much smaller everything has become over the past 30 and 40 years. You might remember when a whole room might be taken up to do a computational device that could fit on your wrist.
Yeah, and look how much shallower the human conscious has become, because there's now so much more general knowledge about everything to consume. And not only that, but games to play that isn't necessarily about growing your mind, but improving your response reflex.
That's how we're gauged as effectual, successful humans. You know, if you're more quick to the response,
Yeah.
Or creating an object or board response. You know, you are bored, aren't you? Well, here's what you have to occupy yourself with, and then you won't be bored. And now you are set in this way, in this habit of using this, which didn't apply before, because, well, even if you were bored, what would someone say? Read a book, take a walk, you know, watch something.
When I worked for the Content Delivery Network, and it was, at the time, probably still is, at least the technology, the fastest content delivery network in the world. I mean, Akamai, who I think YouTube uses, you're receiving this video through people online watching this, they've got more raw servers across data centers than probably anyone else. But this network didn't have as many points of presence across the internet, but they had the fastest technology for responding and giving things. And the reason why that's the competition, when I was there about 8 years ago, there was something called the, I forget the phrase, but basically means how long before someone gets out or moves on to something else. And at that time, it was 6 seconds. And if you weren't delivering that video and giving that, that's it. You lost your client and goodbye money and revenue stream.
Yeah, you know, if things take too long to buffer, you're going to move on to something else, right? Is that it?
Not only that, but you know, it unconceals that we're changing now to become a less patient sort of species than our predecessors would have been. Perhaps not all. Not everyone suffered fools or ever will. But you know, I think the majority of people have shifted over, where they might have read a book, now they just want a meme. Kids, I know very few that'll actually sit through a movie or even a television show. They just want to be on a nap, responding to bells and whistles and bright lights.
I would also observe that in Heidegger's time, the standing reserve items might have been your office equipment, your office, your staplers and your paper that is standing around waiting for you to need it at that moment. But now on the internet, all these servers that are being shared, they might be at only 1 or 5% capacity, or when they near 90% capacity, that's when a good webmaster says, hey, it's time for the second server. But in other words, it's being shared almost more fluidly.
Right. Well, there's platform as a service, so I mean, we're even past that, where, you know, if it hits a certain capacity load, it's already pre-programmed to start spinning up more.
Right. Good point. I think Heidegger would create a new term for this. the self-driven unit.
Well,
But
still all has.
But does that come out of the essence of that need? Because the essence, what does the essence represent? I already commented on that, but I think if you guys figure out what the essence is of the object, then you have the reason for the object.
Well, coming a little bit behind Heidegger.
Because he talked about that Wesson. I like that word,
Yeah,
Wesson.
what was the definition of Wesson?
Wesson.
Can you,
That's what I'm saying.
do you remember the
Essence.
Okay, essence,
Yes.
right?
The essential quality.
Was it tied? Because is it like the Dyson, where it's tied to the being of human, the beingness of being human?
No, he didn't mention it.
Okay,
I mean, I was reading from this one.
right. I'm not going to scroll up, but Ellul, who came later, over in France, Western France, he summarized it. It's in that comment, the second comment that I did, where it becomes the fulfillment of human desire as like the ultimate goal. And that's sort of like what the essence of technology is in that respect. But what happens if, let's say, from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, everything's at your fingertips, and all you need is a bed and a computer. And from the moment you wake up, you're on your computer until the moment you fall asleep again.
Well, but what if...
Having your desire fulfilled throughout that entire period of time.
Okay, but even I'll get you one better. I'll combine two different science fiction themes. What if you woke up within the scope of technology such that you could not leave it for anything? So, for instance, there was one science fiction program where the network was in the very atmosphere, and all you would wake, as you said, you would just swipe randomly, and you would get all your information you need, your schedule, alarms, or news headlines, because you were the network. You were channeling. Everything was in the atmosphere. Maybe it was being projected from inside the infrastructure, and then you would go into your kitchen, use your replicator for breakfast. Okay. Then when you were finished, you would leave your house, use your portable module to contact the neighborhood, or neighborhood, transporter operator. Go to work. What did I say?
We should shut the door because we had a few people kind of. Yeah.
What did I say? A neighborhood.
You said neighbor horde.
That's just my thick accent coming out.
Okay.
Take your mind out of it.
No, horde. Like I was thinking, maybe like Walking Dead or.
Well, I mean the neighborhood. Meaning the local transporter facility say, okay, here's my program, here's my allotment, I'm ready to go to work now. You'd go to work. And you would do something that was what? Technology based, right? And then you would go home and repeat the same process.
Do you even have to, quote unquote, go to work? I mean, can't you just do it from 5 feet from your bed?
I've done it before.
Yes.
That would. I'm not presuming that there would be a change in the culture that way. That all external offices were gone. I'm just saying that to that comment. You could project that further on that way.
I guess I'll take the next paragraph, or do you want it, Mike?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Where and how does this revealing happen? If it is no mere handiwork of man, we need not look far. We need only apprehend in an unbiased way that which has already claimed man and has done so decisively that we can only be man at any given time as the one so claimed. Wherever man opens his eyes and ears, unlocks his heart, and gives himself over to meditating and striving, shaping, working, creating, entreating. Here we go.
Entreating and thanking.
Entreating and thanking, he finds himself everywhere already brought into the unconcealed. Wow, how many items was that? I'm sorry, I have to count this. So you gotta open eyes and ears. You gotta unlock heart. You've gotta give yourself over to meditating and striving, shaping and working, entreating and thinking. Okay, 8 different steps I got there. finds himself everywhere already brought into the unconcealed. The unconcealment of the unconcealed has already come to pass whenever it calls man forth into the modes of revealing allotted to him. When man, in his way from within unconcealment, reveals that which presence is, he merely responds to the call of unconcealment, even when he contradicts it. There's a lot of things here I need to pause. What is Heidegger saying here?
If man applies, his ability to think, be mindful, be self-aware, or understand that, to apply himself, then things will be unconcealed or revealed or made easier, perhaps, or
Entreating and thinking. Thinking I can understand. I gotta read.
entreat is to want to persuade, in a way, someone to do something for you. You kind of sweeten it for them.
To make an earnest request of someone. Ask earnestly, petition for.
I didn't want to say beg.
I see. So yeah. So okay. I get that. So it's okay.
It's like, man, I entreat you, please let the prisoners go. Something.
Oh,
like
you
that.
let the
It's very-
prisoners go. Thank you for doing that.
It's very English.
Well, it seems like you're having to put your full self into this, and then the unconcealment of the unconcealed was revealing allotted to him. Okay. And in this way, from the unconcealed reveals that which presence is. That which presence is. Okay, so that's being being subject to your time and place, whatever's there and around you, whatever your role or function, I suppose, would be. Merely responds to the call, the unconcealment, whenever, even when he contradicts it. So, even if you don't like it, I mean, what are we talking about here? All he has to do is respond. It doesn't matter how he's responding. He's still part of that concealment process. So you could, I don't know, rage against technology. You could take your phone and smash it against the ground. You're still.
Maybe this is like if you make like a Thoreauian, like go out into the woods. Like if you were to do that today, you're still sort of responding.
Oh yes, you're right.
You're still contradicting. You're still within the matrix, whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know why Thoreau went into the woods in the first place, right? Yeah.
He evade taxes, right? He didn't want to pay taxes.
No, actually.
Several reasons.
Yeah, well, the one I'm familiar with, Dan might chime in with something else to add here, was he was working in technology. He worked at a pencil factory, and the pulp in the air of the place, or the lead, or maybe paint, it really affected his health, like his sinuses. He had to get out of there, so that's why he went into the woods, essentially.
Yeah, it did affect Thoreau's health. He had health problems all through his life. But the other two reasons for solitude and using the wilderness is he believed very much in living in your own economy.
Yes.
To him, economy was a very important word, like Heidegger chooses his words. And economy to Thoreau meant that he could work to earn what he needs to live on for a whole year. He could work for 6 weeks.
Isn't that beautiful?
And he would then have the rest of the year free. And when he says free, he means free philosophically and psychologically. Free of the demands that society places upon us, that you must work.
Isn't that amazing?
That is, yes, and he was exploring his, desire to be alone and explore his own individuality, but living an existence of simply existing off of your interests and impulses, and activities and schedules, it does run its course after a while, and you really want to get into something that is more meaningful, more purposeful, more intuitive to think, because you can't stop thinking. If you're already a thoughtful person, you can't stop. You can place yourself in the simplest of environment, thinking it's great, but you're always going to be thinking about the all of the nuts and bolts of that.
I think Thoreau's thing though was more getting in touch with nature as
Right.
a sort of spiritual kind of thing.
Right.
I think it maybe is transcending the thought.
So
Yep,
I was
you're
just
right.
responding to that. After 6 weeks, after a while, you kind of want to do more and more to be more stimulating, unless something is preventing that from occurring within you.
You define a set of things driving a human being, and I think it ended in desire, which is where our conversation led to prior up to this point today. Let me add to that list. It could be values, it could be principles, also, and maybe someone wants to develop them or study or research them or find a way to share them if they think it's going to make not just their own economy, but the economy of others be a better trade-up, let's say.
I think also relating to his words here, he contradicts it at the end. It's similar to what Mike was saying, is the other reason why Thoreau did this, besides economy, was self-discovery. He realized that only through solitude and being in the wilderness and being away from society, which was to be mistrusted, only there could he discover his true self.
I love that you put in that mistrusted, but there was a Roman emperor who said he couldn't trust anyone who had to go afar on holiday. Because what are they up to? But Heidegger, in one of his later essays, stated that he thought that civilization got in the way of being.
Well, that agrees with Thoreau
Yeah.
and the Transcendentalists.
Thus, when man, investigating, observing, ensnares nature as an area of his own conceiving, is already been claimed by a way of revealing that challenges him to approach nature as an object of research. So we have a bit of the enframing idea here. Until even the object disappears into the objectlessness of standing reserve. So, and that's that whole civilization and framing. Framing is an idea we covered in a previous reading. It's there's a fellow I know whose father and uncle, when they would look at a hillside, they'd say, "Oh, well, I can develop that and put all these houses and make all this money." Not seeing it in any sort of other way with any sort of other value attached to it other than that.
I imagine that can be just is very dependent upon, like, that's a developer's mindset, but I mean, depending upon, where you come from, like,
Right.
or whatever your vocation is, that people tend to just see it through those lenses, But I guess the hope is to not do that, right? To sort of see the hill for the hill.
Well, yeah, and not only that, but what is the unknown cost when you do that? It's the classic story. Was it Lorenzo's Oil? Where was it I don't know, they're somewhere in the Amazon and they've got the cure for cancer. Only these developers are ready to tear down the trees and turn in the grazing land for more cows that people aren't going to eat. So much for that.
So this last sort of paragraph, thus starting with thus, it's basically, maybe I'm sort of putting it out there, and you tell me. It's basically saying, once we do like what you were saying, like the developer kind of doing to the hill, right?
Enframing. That's his phrase.
Yeah, once we begin that process of enframing, even the object becomes
just disappears.
just disappears, yeah, into just the standing reserve. I get it. Okay. Just
You
for
want
myself
to?
there.
This is great. Do you want to do the next paragraph for us? Modern technology.
Sure. Modern technology, as an ordering revealing, is, then, no merely human doing. Therefore, we must take that challenging that sets upon man to order the real as standing reserve, in accordance with the way in which it shows itself. That challenging gathers man into ordering. This gathering concentrates man upon ordering the real as standing reserve.
So important, isn't it? I mean, it'd be looking at that forest and seeing it for the, let's say, the ecosystem, which is, by the way, a word that came out of technology, ecosystem. It's a word that came out of circuit design. And then we applied it to nature. So in a way, where are we at here? We've got 25 minutes remaining. So it could be looking at that forest as a potential cure for cancer, let's say. But maybe just being valuable in terms of, there's an economist who put forth and figured out what the actual value of a tree is, like whatever standard size tree is, in terms of, let's say, the carbon capture that it provides over its lifetime. And the amount was, I forget what was come up with, but as I recall, somewhere around the range of $132,000 over its lifetime. It could be that, or it could be cardboard boxes. So there's, I think that gives sort of a shattering realization in terms of what could actually be lost if that is indeed the value of the tree compared to what we might turn it into.
But I mean, the value is determined based upon what we can turn it into, right?
Well, that's our framing mind.
Right.
But what is its actual? He's saying don't take this civilized approach, but his 1927 opus was Being and Time. So he's saying, what is so he's saying let's refocus our attention to what is already, and then see the reality for it in perhaps all of its richness, not necessarily our schemes for what we can make of it, but what it really is. That's a challenge to us. Who wants to pick up?
I'll volunteer for the next 4 little paragraphs because they have a lot of German. That which primordially unfolds the mountains into mountain ranges and courses through them in their folded togetherness is the gathering that we call Gebirge, mountain chain. That original gathering from which unfolds the ways into which we have feelings of one kind or another we name Gemüt, which is disposition. We now name the challenging claim that gathers man thither to order the self-revealing as standard reserve, Gestell, in framing. We dare to use this word in the sense that has been thoroughly unfamiliar up till now.
We've got a footnote. Scroll down here. Okay.
You want me to do that too?
Please.
Okay. Footnote 17. The translation and framing for Gestell is intended to suggest, through the use of the prefix n, something of the active meaning that Heidegger here gives to the German word, while following the discussion that now ensues, in which in framing assumes a central role. The reader should be careful not to interpret the word as though it simply meant a framework of some sort. Instead, he should constantly remember that in framing is fundamentally a calling forth. It is a challenging claim, a demanding summons that gathers so as to reveal. This claim inframes in that it assembles and orders. It puts into the framework or configuration everything that it summons forth through an ordering for use that it is forever restructuring anew. Wow, that's a description very similar to the emergent science, which we've which the world of science has been developing in the last few years, where something emerges from the chaos. And just reading that footnote, I thought of a famous example of emergence, where when our mind thinks of coffee, we don't just think of black liquid. We don't just think of a cup with a circular or oval top or a handle. We don't just think of hotness and steam. We think of all the aspects of coffee simultaneously, and it's playing in our mind like a
The
symphony.
experience that it provides for us.
Yeah.
Now, do you think enframing is the same as reframing?
Well, he's calling us to a process of reframing, to abandon or replace.
To establish a new meaning for something.
Seeing what really is the true value of the world, not just what we might imagine we could turn it into.
And that would be what? Philosophical. Shall I pick up on this?
Here we go.
According to ordinary usage, the word gestel, frame, means some kind of apparatus. Example, a book rack. So it's also the name for skeleton. And the employment of the word gestel or enframing that is now required of us seems equally eerie, not to speak of its arbitrariness with which words of a mature language are thus misused. Can anything be more strange? Surely not. Yet this strangeness is an old usage of thinking, and indeed thinkers accord with this usage precisely at the point where it is a matter of thinking that which is highest. We, late-born, are no longer in a position to appreciate the significance of Plato's daring to use the word eidos for that which is everything, and each particular thing endures as present. For eidos, in the common speech, meant the outward aspect that a visible thing offers to the physical eye. Plato exacts of this word, however, something utterly extraordinary, that its name more precisely is not and never will be perceivable with physical eyes. But even this by no means the full extent of what is extraordinary here. Do you want to stop there and discuss that page?
Yes, and I think we better start with the definition of eidos.
Well, what I was thinking was maybe he's talking about colloquial language. That we don't use everything as it is meant in the timeless dictionary. That words change over time and culture.
Eidos, a Greek from meaning, from, essence, type, or species.
Form, essence, type, or species. Yeah.
Need another definition.
Because he probably would have used essence if that's right. Like, he uses that term, doesn't he?
Yes.
Okay, so. Well, he's referencing Plato, though, so maybe that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, well,
essence.
he was pointing out that Plato was kind of it's not haughty, but he was saying, I see it in a way that maybe you're not. Not only that, but it's daring to say that I see it and you don't, and what I see is true.
Very much so.
How does that relate back to what Heidegger said about this? Let me go back to PDF. For eidos in the common speech meant the outward aspect. And then we've got this word here in square brackets, Anstich,
Ansicht.
Thank you. Okay, so what's that mean? I'm gonna get close here so I can.
Ansicht means the outward characteristics of something, its external appearance.
Dan, do you speak German?
View.
Some.
That's great.
The view, opinion, quotation. Okay, point of view. Okay. And German to English translation.
So, what is the entire meaning of the passage? Is he trying to lament the change in European culture since Plato and his Roman times, use of the language, or is he saying that things do change inward, outward, and we only see what the outward is? That maybe we have to do something to bring the inward in line with that?
Plato exacts to this word, however, something utterly extraordinary, that it name what precisely is not and never will be perceivable with physical eyes.
So that's the whole essence.
Yeah.
That there's some essence to something.
You can't just take it on what your sensory perception is giving you.
I think of an example, I don't know if it applies here, but in the old days when they used to create special effects for movies like a monster walking or a dinosaur walking, if we look back on those images today, we would think, oh, that's simplistic, it looks fake. Why? Because they simulated what a creature whose body is moving. But today, if they build that creature for a film, they build it in muscle and bone first, and then they cover it so that it's actually moving like a real creature would move, and therefore it's more realistic.
He's asking us to explore the depths.
The depths of the essence.
Compared with the demands that Plato makes on language and thought in this and other instances, the use of the word Gestell. Remind us what Gestell means?
Gestell, where are you in this?
Towards the end.
Well, he says it's to frame something, to your way of viewing it.
Okay. As name of the essence modern technology, which we now venture here is almost harmless. Okay, so if you try to take Plato's way, it's almost harmless. Is that what he's saying? Even so, the usage now remains something exacting and is open to misinterpretation. I guess that's why I'm spending so much time here.
Mm-hmm. It's tough.
Well, we're gonna. Yeah.
Why do you think he is liking Plato's use of his language in his time?
Because, well, the modern technology is in Plato's time. Modern technology is that if you only take Plato's thing, it's like Albert Einstein's statement. You can't solve the problems of today with the thinking of today or the past, because the thinking of the past never encountered what today has brought upon this.
Okay, so that's a good example.
Poor
Okay.
paraphrase, but
Yeah, I think that's a good example.
bent here. So, let's see what he says in the next paragraph.
I can do that if you want.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
This is the screen that's actually going into the broadcast video. So we're listening.
Okay. Enframing means the gathering together of that setting upon which sets upon man, that is, challenges him forth to reveal the real in the mode of ordering as standing reserve. Enframing means that way of revealing which holds sway in the essence of modern technology and which is itself nothing technological. On the other hand, all those things that are so familiar to us and are standard parts of an assembly, such as rods, pistons, and chassis belong to the technological. The assembly itself, however, together with the aforementioned stock parts, falls within the sphere of technological activity, and this activity always merely responds to the challenging of enframing, but it never comprises enframing itself or brings it about.
So what's your interpretation of that?
I'm still getting there.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's comparing the two ideas, the technological part of assembling a car with rods, pistons, and chassis. That's a technological endeavor. But how you use that chassis is the second part, which is the enframing part. In other words, what purpose does it have?
In and of itself, with obviously assembling an engine here, and a mass-produced engine, and it all is said right there in the last, but it never comprises the enframing itself. It's not the engine doesn't know it's going to go into a motor and propel a plane or a car or ship. It's just the product of.
And then once we enframe it, it becomes what it is and it serves its purpose once we enframed the technology. He's saying that enframing is not part of technology, though, right?
Well, the technology, or the complex compound machine, which is let's say an internal combustion motor or engine, sorry, it's not the enframing. It may compress a mixture of fuel and air and make an explosion and produce a motion and drive our transportation or create electricity in the form of a generator, alternator, whatever. But it's not doing any of that. It's existing because it's gone. It's the result of the enframing process, but it isn't the enframing process itself.
I'm really kind of curious. Like at the beginning of this, it's basically saying enframing means the gathering together, so on, to reveal the real. So is he saying that once we enframe it, then the essence is revealed? Like the revealing the real? Because wouldn't that be a bit of like saying that the essence is dependent upon what we're enframing it to be? Which then seems, maybe I'm missing something. I feel like I might be.
Well, we might be thinking it's deeper than what he's actually stating. We know the real feeling of what it is. Those of us who have driver's license and experience behind the wheel of a car know what that is to turn the ignition.
So that's what he means by to reveal the real.
And that's the new real that didn't exist in Plato's time either. So
right.
I
see what you're saying now. Yeah. Okay. It's not like an essence of some independent essence that this thing has, and now it's.
Or you can imagine something only to a certain extent, without actually experiencing it with your senses. You won't get to the essence of it.
True. I mean, there's an emotional component to driving that I think we're all to some degree familiar with. Either we harken back to our early days of doing it and the freedom that granted us, or enabled us to explore, or it could be the process of being stuck in traffic when all you want to do is be home. I don't know if I'm connecting with what you're saying.
Okay.
But I do recognize that we're kind of going back to the opening of this essay. We're going to get into instrumentality again here. So let's see what new thing he has to share with us. Who wants to pick up with the words meaning to set upon?
More German, so it's for me.
Mm-hmm.
The word stellen, to set upon, in the name Gestell, in framing, not only means challenging, at the same time it should preserve the suggestion of another stellen from which it stems, namely that producing and presenting, her und darstellen, which in the sense of poesis lets that presences come forth into unconcealment. This producing that brings forth, e.g., the erecting of a statue in the temple precinct, and the challenging ordering now under consideration are indeed fundamentally different, and yet they remain related in their essence. Both are ways of revealing, of aletheia, in inframing that unconcealment comes to pass in conformity with which the work of modern technology reveals the real as standing reserve.
Let me pause you right there. I just want to remind people, aletheia, the definition of the word, which is another one of Heidegger's deals. Greek word variously translated as unclosedness, unconcealedness, disclosure, or truth. Thank you.
To finish, this work is therefore neither only a human activity nor a mere means within such activity. The merely instrumental, merely anthropological definition of technology is therefore, in principle, untenable, and it cannot be rounded out by being referred back to some metaphysical or religious explanation that undergirds it. Wow, a lot to consider.
Okay, so I'm going to give us two examples, and that's the story of Icarus, and here's this mythological story of someone taking flight through imagination of taking feathers and melting wax and creating wings and being able to escape entrapment by flying in a sort of mythological sense, and the technology failing them. Eventually, because of the hubris of the guy flying too close to the sun, but you can't have a metaphysical or dream of flying and then say that that's the same as actually getting inside of a metal tube that propels you 500 miles an hour. That dream of flight and that reality of flight, I don't know. The merely instrumental, merely anthropological definition of technology is therefore, in principle, untenable.
Anthropological is human focused, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So the instrumental,
like personifying. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
And instrumental, he talks about at the start of the essay. He gets into the instrumental, the idea of the throttle, the control stick for an airplane, your steering wheel, your accelerator, all those things that maybe the feel of the brake and the road feel of driving a car. You understand instrumentality in that the car becomes an extension of your spirit, your desire to move down the road. But he's saying that mere instrumentality and merely whatever the anthropological definition of technology is, I'm not sure what that is exactly.
Maybe the personal use of technology.
Principle.
How it is conformed by the species. Or
I think maybe more like that it's an extension of humanity, because that would be how we would.
Right.
No, I'm thinking anthropomorphizing, right?
Well, no, I was thinking the same thing, when you mentioned that.
I might be
Steps into the. On the individual basis, it's instrumental, or it's instrumentality, or what it gives us. I have no idea how to approach what he means by anthropological definition of technology. Maybe it was something already just common knowledge in his culture.
I'm gonna take a stab at it.
Please do.
And say, I may be totally wrong, but I'm gonna say that perhaps there was at his time a common definition of technology that suggested tools in general, so that, and then anthropological could mean like people could look back in time and see how man is superior to animals, because he came up with he chiseled out a flint rock and created something sharp that could kill animals and all this stuff. So it created all these artifacts, and so then the definition of technology is the tools that man has left over time anthropologically. And so today, the tools have changed, but it's still technology. But he's suggesting that maybe that's not the correct way of viewing technology. It's not the tools, the nuts and bolts, but the function that we're trying to get at to help us and independent of whatever we use or something like that. I don't know.
The keyword I pulled from what you stated was artifact, and I think that really says it right there.
Maybe if we trade anthropological for historical. Remember, he is being very. I don't think he is using any meaning outside of the literal definition.
I don't want to leave on. Well, maybe it would be a good cliffhanger, but and it is 8:30. We could finish right here, or we could try to squeeze in one more paragraph before we're asked to leave. Thumb up or down? Down, up, up.
I'm just gonna be neutral on this.
Stacy?
Don't care.
They might kick us out anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna let. I see a lot of other people hanging out on their computers, so I think we can squeeze in one more paragraph unless you have someplace to go.
I don't think we should be too fearful of the man
let's
coming in.
let's not eat up more time talking about it. Let's just eat
It
another
would be an
paragraph.
exciting live stream,
Yes.
If the police have to drag us out.
It remains
No,
true.
philosophy or die.
I'm gonna run us through. You're gonna have to on that screen. You're gonna have to move the.
Philosophy in the parking lot. No.
You use 2 fingers to scroll on that screen. We've got a couple.
We would not
here.
be taken to the parking lot.
So the next step in this essay is it remains true nonetheless that man in the technological age is in a particularly striking way challenged forth into revealing. That revealing concerns nature above all as the chief storehouse of the standing energy reserve. I just realized we're costing you money. Okay.
So they charge more?
Yeah, by quarter of an
Fiends.
hour. No,
Fiends.
it's $5 an hour. It's going to be another $1.25 if.
Fiendish.
That revealing concerns nature above all as the chief storehouse of the standing reserve. Revealing concerns nature above all as the chief storehouse of the standing energy reserve. So he's basically saying what a lot of people have said, like the classical liberals, and I read a lot of Henry George, and he would say it all ultimately comes back to land and the natural resources. That's where it all comes from is nature. In terms of what we get from, it says here, accordingly, man's ordinary attitude and behavior display themselves first in the rise of modern physics as an exact science. Modern science's way of representing pursues and entraps nature as a calculable coherence of forces. Modern physics is not experimental physics because it applies apparatus to the questioning of nature. Rather, the reverse is true because physics, indeed already as pure theory, sets nature up to exhibit itself as a coherence of forces calculable in advance. It therefore orders its experiments precisely for the purpose of asking whether and how nature reports itself. When set up in this way, that's not too exciting, but I'm glad we didn't start with that on our 4th reading. I'm going to keep going because it's a short one. But after all, mathematical physics arose almost 2 centuries before technology. How then could it have already been set upon by modern technology and placed in its service? The facts testify to the contrary. Surely technology got underway only when it could be supported by exact physical science. Reckoned chronologically, this is correct, though historically it does not hit upon the truth.
So that's curious. Mathematical physics arose almost 2 centuries before technology. It'd be interesting if he had landmarks about where he's referring to.
Calculus 16 something, Leibniz and Newton, and then you can't even apply a lot of that stuff until later, but it flourishes. And then it allows us to do things we wouldn't have been able to do without math.
So he's saying that technology is a product of the modern era, which would be like 1700s or 1800s or and higher?
Modern technology, yeah. I mean, you go to Leibniz. You can go to Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, a lot of that stuff.
I think the reason why historically it doesn't hit upon the truth is because, especially like the way we're using the word technology, it sort of is all encompassing. And who's to say that like the prerequisite for technology is a certain mathematical formula? You know what I mean? Like they had technology. I don't know. The blacksmith had whatever. I have no idea how that works, but
Well, it may have taken centuries to bring certain ideas forth, like the helicopter.
definitely. I mean, there's like minor forms of technology, less advanced maybe, and in their time it was advanced. I think that's kind of what he means by it doesn't hit on the truth.
We're still in this block, and we've got, I'd say, if we can do 8 more minutes of reading time and be out of here in 2 minutes, then we're not going to exceed $1.25 over. If anyone wants to step up and give $1.25 so that he doesn't have to pay.
We don't.
I know you probably. I hope we're not eating into your sleep time here, Dan.
I
So long suffering, such the stoic. As the name implies, the modern physical theory of nature prepares the way first not simply for technology, but for the essence of modern technology. For already in physics, the challenging gathering together into ordering, revealing holds sway. But in it, that gathering does not yet come expressly to appearance. Modern physics is the herald of enframing. Ooh. A herald whose origin is still unknown. Oh, getting back to an earlier concept that it's a question I keep asking is, where do ideas come from?
I was picturing when he describes physics as the herald of enframing, maybe it's because our understanding of the universe is becoming more comprehensive. And so enframing is moving to the next level, not just understanding a little bit of it, but the larger picture.
Yes. A lot of this we can thank Spinoza for. The essence of modern technology has for a long time been concealing itself. Even where power machinery has been invented, where electrical technology is in full swing, and where atomic technology is well underway. All coming to presence, not only modern technology keeps itself everywhere concealed to the last. There's a footnote. Coming to presence, here translated the Grund Westende. I don't know. Here we go. Yep.
Oh, the gerund
Thank you.
Vishenda.
Verbal form that appears in this volume only in this essay with the introduction into the discussion of coming to presence is
I
an
was
alternate
right.
translation
Chronologically speaking.
of the noun
Wesen.
Wesen. Thank you, essence. Subsequent to Heidegger's consideration of the meaning of essence below, occasionally the presence of
Das Vishenda.
is regrettably but unavoidably obscured. Okay.
Really? He admits that his ideas are obscure?
Or
Wonderful.
in the translation, yeah.
I like the chronologically paragraph. That I guess that was kind of along the lines of what I was figuring.
Oh, okay. I need to get.
Are we done?
Yeah, it's a good time to wrap up.
All right.
The whole library closes in 20.
Yeah, I think they're starting to shut the lights off down out there too. All right, so where are we gonna pick up, because we've got literally only a paragraph left to this page, and technically 6 more minutes. So
Is it number 19?
I finished at the footnote 19 there.
Oh.
If you want to read that, then there we go.
Chronologically speaking. Nevertheless, it remains, with respect to its holding sway, that which precedes all, the earliest, The Greek thinkers already knew of this when they said that which is earlier, with regard to the arising, that holds sway, becomes manifest to us men, only later. That which is primarily early shows itself only ultimately to men. Therefore, in the realm of thinking, a painstaking effort to this, through still more primally what was primally thought, is not the absurd wish to revive what is past, but rather the sober readiness to be astounded before the coming of what is early.
That totally destroys the whole idea of, oh, that's just an old idea. Because maybe that old idea was just an unrealized idea, an idea that wasn't realizable at the time, at least at that level of technology or human thinking, but certainly realizable and certainly something that could bring about something of, I don't know, let's say the better life. Did that take us all the way there?
Well, there's one more paragraph,
Okay, please.
but I can't see the bottom of the page here.
Two fingers.
Oh. All right, last paragraph on page 57. Chronologically speaking, modern physical science begins in the 17th century. In contrast, machine power technology develops only in the second half of the 18th century. But modern technology, which for chronological reckoning is the later, is, from this point of view of the essence holding sway within it, the historically earlier.
So what the things that they were able to achieve in the 18th century, they were already thought of, they just weren't achievable a century ahead of prior. And that's great because it means we went from page 52, we did 6 pages today, which kind of fits considering we started a little bit later, but we can pick up on page 58 at our next section.
Yep.
Stopping recording. Does anyone have anything to say before we finish up?
We must bring coffee next time.
Amen.
Yes.
Agreed.
All right.
Or go to a place that sells coffee.
No.
But it has to be a quiet place because we're recording.
Mm.
All right. Speaking of which, I'm stopping recording and I'm stopping stream. Thank you all.